Pay attention, because what is happening in the United States automotive industry is not just another market downturn, but a true economic earthquake that is completely transforming the global trade landscape. In just 1 year, over 42,000 jobs have disappeared from the core of the U.S. automotive sector, affected by a tariff policy that, according to experts, causes more harm than good. 8 major Asian automakers, including Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Hyundai, and Kia, have begun withdrawing investments, closing assembly plants, and relocating production outside U.S. territory. Canada has become the preferred destination, taking advantage of trade uncertainty to attract factories, battery plants, and highly specialized jobs. Meanwhile, in the United States, new vehicle prices have skyrocketed, dealerships have empty lots, and an industry that was once the pillar of the middle class is now teetering on the edge of a deep crisis. How did this situation arise? It all started with the promise to protect domestic production, but the imposition of a 25% tariff on imported cars, combined with another 25% already in place, created a trade barrier equivalent to 275%, which paralyzed supply chains, drove up costs, and halted assembly lines. What was proposed as a defense against foreign competition ended up being, according to some analysts, a fatal sentence for thousands of jobs. The first to be affected were the workers, with factories closing, shifts eliminated, and a domino effect impacting restaurants, suppliers, and local schools dependent on the automotive industry's wages. At the same time, the cost of new vehicles soared, becoming unattainable for many families already facing high interest rates on their financing. As a result, consumers turned to the used car market, but there they also found exorbitant prices. Vehicles over a decade old began selling at premium prices, while compact SUVs disappeared from inventories within days. Specialists point out that this situation will persist until tariffs are reduced and production regains stability, something that seems far off as trade tensions continue. Amid this chaos, Canada has emerged as the big winner. With federal and provincial programs designed to attract strategic minerals, battery factories, and supplier parks, the neighboring country is consolidating a key position within the USMCA trade agreement. Its political stability and proximity to the U.S. market make it an ideal refuge for manufacturers seeking to avoid tariffs without moving away from their customer base. The result is clear. While the U.S. automotive industry fragments, Canada gains ground, investments, and prominence in the economy of the future. But this transformation affects not only executives of major brands but also American households that now must pay more for less, with limited options and a growing sense that the American automotive dream is increasingly distant. This is the inevitable cost of a poorly calculated trade war. The most worrying aspect is that this is not a temporary or isolated crisis, but a structural reconfiguration of automotive trade in North America. The two Japanese giants, Toyota and Honda, are struggling to adapt to this new reality, facing multi-billion-dollar losses while trying to maintain stable prices and protect their market shares. Toyota, for example, has warned that tariffs could cost it nearly $10 billion, which has already forced the company to lower its profit forecasts. Although more than half of its U.S. sales come from local plants, the company still depends on a network of components that cross borders and are now severely affected by tariffs. Even with a provisional agreement between the U.S. and Japan that reduced tariffs from 275% to 15%, the rate remains 6 times higher than the original 25%, representing a severe blow to operating margins. Honda faces similar challenges, despite having significant facilities in both the U.S. and Canada and having moved part of its hybrid production. From CR-V and Civic models manufactured on U.S. soil, it still depends on supply chains that include imported parts, especially electronics and transmission systems, which continue to be heavily taxed. The plan is clear: localize more production and components within the region. But analysts say this transition will take years, not just quarters. During that time, costs will continue to rise, with consequences for both manufacturers and consumers. Meanwhile, other smaller Japanese brands are on the verge of a deep crisis. Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, and Mitsubishi are facing the greatest challenges in this scenario. For example, Nissan stopped publishing financial forecasts after anticipating multi-million-dollar losses due to tariffs. Although it owns factories in Tennessee and Mississippi, its heavy reliance on imports, especially from Mexico, is significantly affecting its profit margins. To mitigate this situation, they have implemented aggressive discounts on models like the Rogue and Pathfinder, produced in the U.S., but have had to halt production of certain vehicles in Mexico, disrupting their launch schedule. Subaru, which lacks a significant global presence, chose to raise prices across nearly its entire range. However, specialists warn it could face additional multi-million-dollar costs if it does not accelerate local production and reduce dependence on imported parts. In Mazda's case, exports from Mexico to the U.S. plummeted by 50%, so it is now betting everything on its joint plant with Toyota in Alabama. Mitsubishi, with limited U.S. capacity, risks losing its price competitiveness if forced to raise prices. In this context of growing pressure, even alternatives such as strategic alliances, mergers, or market exits are being considered. According to industry experts, what is happening is not just a temporary adjustment, but a profound transformation in how, where, and with which partners' cars are manufactured on the continent. In this new scenario, every decision has enormous repercussions for the economy, employment, and purchasing power of millions of American families. However, not all Asian automakers are retreating in this landscape. Hyundai and Kia have adopted a completely different strategy: attack rather than defend. While other brands reduce production or abandon segments, Hyundai and Kia are strongly betting on fully local manufacturing in the U.S., taking the state of Georgia as the center of their industrial offensive. Their goal is clear. By 2030, more than 80% of their U.S. sales will be produced locally. The industrial complex in Georgia, with capacity for 500,000 units annually by 2028, will be the core of this bet. The strategy is based on a principle increasingly repeated in the sector: avoid tariffs not through diplomatic negotiations, but by manufacturing where the vehicles are sold. By integrating local steel suppliers, domestic assembly, and new technologies, Hyundai seeks to offer stable and competitive prices in an environment where costs tend to skyrocket. However, this bet is not without sacrifices. The South Korean company had to reduce profit margins, and the effects of tariffs still strongly impact its quarterly results. Additionally, they faced a major disruption when Korean specialists responsible for starting battery production lines in Georgia were detained during an immigration raid, highlighting the delicate intersection between trade and labor policies. In response, Hyundai executives have intensified efforts in both Washington and the Southeast to relax immigration regulations affecting foreign technicians. At the same time, the brand plans to expand its portfolio with more hybrid models and long-range electric vehicles by 2027, and even launch a truck designed exclusively for the North American market before 2030. Kia and Genesis, Hyundai's sister brands, have already surpassed 1 million units in production capacity in the U.S. If tariffs remain, this early investment could position the Hyundai-Kia Group as the new regional leader, leaving behind competitors still dependent on plants outside the territory. But the consequences of this trade dispute go beyond corporate strategies. The real impact is felt by millions of consumers and workers. For buyers, prices no longer follow a market logic based on supply and demand, but respond directly to tariff decisions and trade policies. A vehicle that once cost $30,000 now sells for $35,000 or more. Those seeking used options face older cars with less safety technology and higher mileage but inflated prices. This has given rise to a worrying phenomenon. Middle-income American families can no longer afford new vehicles that meet the basic features they desire. For those working in this sector, the future depends on which company manages to rebuild its supply chains in North America more quickly. In this competition, states like Georgia and Canadian provinces like Quebec and Ontario are intensely vying to attract new plants, promising jobs and substantial capital investment. Meanwhile, the U.S. automotive industry finds itself in a delicate situation where tariffs and time are not in its favor. Just when many anticipated market stabilization, a key player has quietly emerged, shifting the balance of power in North America toward Canada. While tariff policy uncertainty worsens in the U.S., Canada is advancing decisively, consolidating itself as a strategic refuge for manufacturers seeking stability, access to essential minerals, and a more predictable trade framework under the USMCA agreement. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec are attracting multi-billion-dollar investments in gigafactories, supplier parks, and electric vehicle assembly centers, offering aggressive incentives and an image of certainty that, according to specialists, is exactly what brands need to plan long-term. The motto, "Produce where you sell," has ceased to be just a slogan and has become a vital rule in an environment where every cent counts and every tariff can determine the fate of thousands of jobs. Industrial policy experts point out that this change, although silent, could mark the beginning of a historic transition, the gradual shift of North America's automotive heart from Detroit to the northern part of the continent. If Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois were once synonymous with steel, engines, and assembly lines, today there is increasing talk about opportunities in Ontario, projects in Montreal, or strategic agreements sealed in Toronto. Although this transformation may seem distant or technical to many, its repercussions are already felt in daily life. Families that used to renew their cars every 3 or 4 years now extend the lifespan of their vehicles beyond a decade, resigning themselves to paying more for less, without access to modern safety technologies or greater energy efficiency. Young workers who aspired to stable jobs in assembly plants face a fragmented market, where opportunities depend on the state or even the country where new factories are established. Meanwhile, dealerships, once full of offers and promotions, struggle to maintain inventory and resort to desperate tactics such as reducing equipment to keep prices down, eliminating incentives, or even redirecting their operations toward imported hybrid models. Some analysts warn that this cycle of fragmentation could worsen if a coherent industrial policy combining support for local production with more stable international agreements is not urgently designed. This is where politics plays a fundamental role. Every decision on tariffs, every round of trade negotiations, every dispute with allies like Canada or Mexico directly impacts the pocketbooks of millions of Americans. The debate has transcended economics to become deeply political. Who should bear the cost of protecting the national industry? How can economic sovereignty be balanced with the need to integrate efficient supply chains? What development model do we want for our country? Citizens, workers, consumers, and small businesses are at the center of a storm they did not choose, but that profoundly affects their lives. What is most worrying is not only what has already happened, but what might come. What will happen if other industries follow the example of the automotive sector and move their operations abroad? Is the United States prepared to face a structural production outflow if tariff policies continue without a coordinated strategy? Or are we, as some experts suggest, at a turning point that could redefine the country's place on the global economic map? We want to hear your opinion. Do you consider Hyundai and Kia's bet in Georgia the smartest move or a risky strategy if tariffs are relaxed? Will Toyota and Honda be able to continue protecting consumers from drastic price increases? And, most importantly, are we witnessing the beginning of a new era in which Canada becomes the new automotive capital of North America? Share your ideas, experiences, and vision of the future in the comments, because this conversation goes beyond cars. It's about jobs, families, and the economic destiny of an entire nation.